So with half of the TFR Spring Cup series done, it's time for the second half. Round 7 comes to you live from Sebring International Raceway. And this is round 7 of the TFR Spring Super Cup live on Glacier TV. Will Vinton in the booth, minus Rob Sutherland this week. So Yoni Backman and Jeffrey Koolbergen making his Glacier TV commentating debut. We'll be bringing you all of the action here from this beautiful historic racetrack. Jeffrey, very good evening to you and welcome to the Glacier TV team.
Hi Will, yeah, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this broadcast and of course a fantastic race which we about to start.
So as I said, half the series is already done and this is where points really start to matter. In the TFR Spring Super Cup, like in iRacing, the best 8 weeks count. So for some of the drivers, Oliver Brandt, David Peterson, as the top 2 drivers in the GT1 class clearly demonstrate, having a good points haul coming into the second half is really important. But for other drivers, it's a chance to gain back some momentum. And we're currently looking at the last 5 minutes of qualifying. Kieran Peace is currently leading the way in the number 78 machine in the GT1 class, with Farouk Manzer and David S. Peterson in rounding out your top 3 in the GT2 class. Once again, Kimmo Suman is your leader in qualifying. GT2 qualifying is already completed, so we can run through the field a bit more conclusively there. So Kimmo is your pole position guy for the GT2 class. Eric Veerdorf will line up in 2nd, John Mallia in 3rd, Daniel Kirsten in 4th, and Toby Bushnell from TFR in 5th. And Jeffrey, this Sebring International Raceway is a track with so much history. Very tricky track with some very long acceleration zones, some tight, tricky corners, some beautifully fast sweeping bends, and to top it all off, it's nighttime.
Yeah, indeed, Will. It's nighttime. That brings some pressure to the drivers as well. It's going to be exciting, and we're going to see some fabulous racing during the night. It's indeed going to be tricky when you are going to brake after the long straights. So
yeah.
Hopefully the drivers will take a look at that.
So one of the things about this night layout is that you can see dotted along the racetrack those little almost like landing lights. Being an airport, it's actually pretty coincidental. But it kind of guides the drivers around the racetrack. They can see the braking points, they can see the braking cones, but at the same time, it's a lot more difficult. You almost get yourself into that kind of tunnel vision movement. And having a look at the gorgeous pink car, the number 69, of course, of David Ward, and you can't really see any further than about 150 meters ahead of you. So you'll be relying on the headlights of other cars and those landing lights to kind of guide you around this race course. We've got about a minute or so left of qualifying. Checkered flag is in the air, so we're waiting for drivers to complete their laps. And don't forget, as always, you can connect with us through the wonders of Twitter. Use the hashtag GlacierTV if you'd like to do so. We will try and get as many tweets as possible to you read out throughout this race. What we want to know today is simple. A, who's going to win the race? And B, who do you think, with half the season left to go, is going to win the championship? Very quickly, while we're waiting for drivers to complete their final lap, Jason Brown does so, I believe, and that means that the gridding process is about to commence. But Oliver Brandt is currently your GT1 championship leader with 95 points. David Peterson is 2nd with just 2 points behind in 93 points. And for third place is that pink car of David Ward. However, he's 20 points behind in that championship battle. In the GT2 class, Kimmo Suerman is completely dominant, 127 points so far. John Mallier in second with 71 points. Then a really good battle actually going on between second, third and fourth. Peter Kaimeyer in third and Eric Verdoff in fourth. So watching the cars grid at the moment, currently the drivers are making their way to the grid for this parade lap. So we'll run through the grid now in its entirety. In the GT1 class, Kieran Peace set the way in qualifying with a 1 minute 53.989. Farouk Manzar lines up second with a 1 minute 54.111. So only Kieran Peace actually managed to get himself into the 1 minute 53s. David Peterson and Oliver Brand, your second and first drivers in the GT1 Championship, line up third and fourth respectively. Adam Kell in fifth, Gary Hickman in sixth. David Ward will be looking for a little bit more than his seventh position on the grid. Ian Rogers in eighth, Jason Brown in ninth, Robert Lowry in 10th, Bart Monin in 11th, Christian Nielsen in 12th, Stephen Van Helsing in 13th, and once again, Kimmo Suerman in the GT2 class out-qualifies a GT1 driver. So you'll have Kimmo Suerman and Michael Orff lining up in row 7, then to run through the rest of the GT2 drivers. In 16th overall, Eric Verdoff, 17th, John Mallier, Daniel Kirsten in 18th, Toby Bushnell 19th, Widko Bubnek in 20th, Jasper Groenegg in 21st, Dave Geimer 22nd, Lassie Brun Hansen in 23rd, Simon Geimer 24th, Christian Schick 25th, Peter Kaimeyer in 26th, Mayor Vlasic 27th, Sasha Rabe in 28th, Duncan Reed 29th, and then Chris Partridge and William Piner round out the grid, with two drivers not qualifying. That is Leo Krupp and Jos van Heuvel.
Yeah, and the cars are on the pace lap currently, so it's going to be a long pace lap, so looking really forward to the green flag.
And as always, regular viewers of the TFR Super Cup know that there's a little bit of discrepancy between the time that you will see on your screen for the countdown and the actual time left remaining in the race. I'll be keeping a very close eye on that. So currently we believe that to be about 4 minutes and 30 seconds, but we'll update you through the race. And apologies for the timing lack in qualifying. It looks as though no one qualified, but they did. Honestly, they did spend the last 30 minutes qualifying. So we'll be having a look as they're coming now into that very tight right-hander. It's actually one of my love-hate corners here. As you see Adam Kell actually going off track in the process. It's almost a bit of a double apex. You've got your first turning, then you've got to get a very good exit from the corner as you come down this long sweeping straightaway into this then 90-degree corner. And this is where the track really starts to pick up speed after a much slower technical first couple of corners. So the cars will do a 90-degree right-hander and then that beautiful double apex left-hander, possibly one of the most electrifying corners on this circuit. Take the first one, take the second one, then line yourself up perfectly. You can shortcut the track a little bit to gain a little bit of speed, but you've got to get your braking point right as you come into this right-hand corner. And then it gets really interesting with the two double apex left-handers again, then that right, left, right chicane.
Yeah, and after that you get your right-hander to the long straight, and the cars are going to pick up a lot of speed over there. So braking point is again very important. The next corner would be also a right-hander, and then to start finish.
And back straight away, you'll see them do that in just a moment's time. This is one of the key passing opportunities on the racetrack. So many lines drivers can take through this final corner. In the Corvette, I've seen so many different driving lines. The same in the 4GT, and it's a corner that really does praise the drivers. You can drive in, get off the throttle, brake, turn the car and get back onto the power all as quickly as possible. But remember that these cars don't have that much downforce, so they've got to be very very careful as they put the throttle back on to make sure they don't spin out, and we'll make sure that we get our resident tech expert Yoni Backman. He's done so much testing around here this week in preparation for the World Tour event tomorrow, to give you a bit of an insight into specifically this final corner. So Kieran Pease will bring the field down to the green flag. Safety car is going to come in just a matter of moments time, and then round 7 of the TFR Spring Super Cup is green. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on these drivers as they come into turn number 1 for the first time. Single file for the most part. I see David Ward there having to go all the way down to the inside. Himself is spinning out already with Adam Kell, almost avoiding a major car pile-up there. Looks as though people for the most part have been able to get through. But Christian Nielsen also onto the grass. And Kimmo Surman is having to take evasive action as they come down into turn number 2. So that was, in that first corner, David Ward, who has, it looks already got so much damage that he was going to be out of the race. He was into the wall, and coming down past the start-finish line, you can go too wide into turn number 1. Just looks as though David Ward went to the inside, had to go further down to the inside to avoid contact, as Adam Kell just broke a little bit too early for them. The two then connected. David Ward was into the wall, and I believe a couple of other drivers involved as well. Michael Orff and Adam Kell, Bart Monin, all involved in that action. Kimmo Surman had to take some really big evasive action, and further back there was a secondary impact by the look of it, involving a couple of other of the GT2 drivers as the field all stacked up to each other. Robert Lowry is also involved in that wreck by the looking of it, just going back having a look through, but by my reckoning there's a good 6 or 7 cars involved. Christian Schick in the GT2 car involved, and Jeffrey, not the sort of thing you'd want to have in turn 1 of this race.
No, definitely not. It's going to be a long race, so an accident in turn 1 with a lot of cars involved is definitely not how you would like to start the race. Meanwhile, the race leaders are coming to the start-finish line for completing the first lap.
Yes, and Kieran Pease is your race leader. Farouk Manzar in second. David Peterson, I believe, is still running in the 3rd position. Oliver Brandt in 4th. Gary Hickman 5th. Ian Rogers 6th in the GT1 class. However, in the GT2 class, John Malia is up into 9th, into the lead, with Toby Bushnell going too wide almost as they come through turn number 1. Who's going to have the ball as they come down into 2? Bushnell's on the outside, just gets out the foot a little bit too earlier, and it allows not only Kimmo Surman to get past him, but John Malliot is leading in the GT2 class with Kimmo Surman behind him. Eric Verdolf now gets into 3rd position in the GT2. Toby Bushnell there lost another position. He's going to try and see whether he can make an attacking move as they come down into that double apex right-hander. Hard on the brakes. Bushnell very, very careful, but manages to get the position done. That puts him back up into 3rd in class. Meanwhile, in the GT1 cars, only 8 drivers by the look of it. Looks as though that they are in contention at the moment, with Christian Nielsen scored 14th overall, but still circulating. Larry Krupp is a full 30 seconds behind the race leader after being involved in that incident. And then you have Michael Orff, Adam Kell, David Ward, Robert Lowry, Bart Monin involved. And in the GT2 class, Witka Bubnek, Asuban Hansen and Christian Schick were all involved. So 8 drivers involved in turn 1 wreck there.
Willem Pinard missed his braking point in turn 2, and that made it possible for Larry Krupp to take his position.
So William Pinard struggling here at the moment in the GT2 class. And I think one of the things that's important to remember is the difference between daytime and nighttime racing. Obviously there's the obvious that there's no light on the track, but the grip levels are completely different from day to night, and a lot of these drivers are preparing for the World Tour event tomorrow, the 120 minutes of Sebring. So then going from daytime, which will be tomorrow, and also running the official series this week, to the nighttime is something that will be very difficult for these drivers to adapt to.
We had a big crash on the, well, not a big, but we had a crash on the back straight.
Yeah, just having a look back to see who was involved in that one, but taken its toll already this race, with a number of drivers just having a look through. I see a big pile of smoke on that backstretch, and it was Peter Kiermaier losing the car on the acceleration zone. Just got a little bit too much wheel on the left-hand side curve as he put the power down, ran a little bit wide, spun the car all the way around that Liquid Moly number 33 machine, keeps it out of the wall by the look of it, but he's very careful having to get back onto the racetrack, lost himself an absolute ton of time.
Currently we are on board with the car number 51, Kimo Sumuin.
Yeah, and that number 51 machine, not used to running in second position, Jeffrey. I know you're pretty new to this series, but he's been dominating so far in the GT2 class all season long. And he is really hounding the pressure on John Mallia as they come through the middle sector of this beautiful Sebring International Raceway. And if Kimo's going to make a pass, Jeffrey, which, I mean, you could probably try and make a move into the final corner, but this nighttime layout makes it very difficult to really pick your braking points as you try and go too wide.
Yeah, absolutely. Although Kimo is now chasing the rear of John Mallia, and he is trying. Now he's still behind John.
Yeah, it looks as though he lost just about a car length to Mallia as he came out of the final corner. Be interesting to see whether Kimo's car was set up to run out front, and whether that means that he's going to have a little bit more difficulty trying to get past Mallia in the number 82 machine. He's not only running first in class, but 9th overall. So these GT2 drivers getting through the wreck at the start of this race meant that these guys are doing a sterling job for the GT2 class and these 4 GTs. And we've had our first comment of the day from Yoni, and he's saying, yeah, okay, they can fight with each other now, but in the Sebring 120 minutes tomorrow, it's my turn to fight with them. Out front, just car going backwards down pit lane. That's Bart Monin. I think he's just testing his car out to see if it will turn left and right appropriately. So he's got his car in his pit box, looking to see whether or not the repairs that he's done will do anything for him. He's not going to get a penalty for that. And in fact, that's a pretty good tactic. You know, you don't want to bring a damaged car out onto the racetrack and end up causing another accident. So some good thinking there by Monin.
Kieran Peace with the car number 78 is slightly running away from position 2.
Yeah, Farouk Manzar, number 46 machine. We've seen Farouk is great at charging down, and under these nights, he just makes his orange and black car look even more intimidating as he comes down to complete lap number 4. Obviously, we're running this race by time, so that makes a little bit of difference, but Farouk Manzar closing down, losing a bit of time actually to tick Kieran Peace in the number 78 machine. Lost about 3/10 of a second last time. And what that means is that Oliver Brandt and David Peterson, running 4th and 3rd respectively, have closed right back onto the back of these leading 2 cars. And Peterson and Brandt not only are fighting for the lead of this race, but they're also fighting with each other, because the gap between 3rd and 4th place, you know, if Peterson could finish ahead of Oliver Brandt, he will take the GT1 championship lead as they leave this racetrack. So to run through your top 5 once again, Kieran Peace is leading the GT1 class from Farouk Manzar. Looks as though Farouk's having a much better lap this time by. In 3rd place you have David S. Peterson in the number 16. Oliver Brandt in 4th, and Adam Kell rounds out your top 5. So Adam Kell, I've got that completely wrong. It's Kieran Peace from Farouk Manzar, from David Peterson, from Oliver Brandt, from Gary Hickman. Adam Kell was obviously involved in that first lap incident. And then in the GT2 class, John Mallia is still leading the way from Kimo Suleiman, but he's very close, just 0.2 of a second as they went past the stripe last time by. Eric Verdoff is in 3rd. However, he's already 3 seconds off the back of these lead two drivers, coming under all sorts of pressure from Toby Bushnell on fourth, and Daniel Kirsten is rounding out your top 5 of the GT2s. So, Jeffrey, I mean, you do quite a lot of long race distances, and you've got yourself settled down now. You know, we're about 10 to 15 minutes into this race. Drivers manage to, you know, get a grip of how their car handles with full fuel in race mode. And how much pressure would you be putting on the driver ahead of you now to try and get ahead?
Depends. You know, it's still a long race.
And as you say that, so Kimo Sermon takes the lead of the GT2 class. A beautiful manoeuvre, but that puts Malia into the outside, who I believe spins it as he goes into turn number 1. Clips the airport landing light, and he's lost himself a good couple of positions there. Christian Nielsen has been able to get past to take second position in the GT2s. And now, Malia, I believe, also lost position to Verdorf in third. So now Malia, all of a sudden, from leading this race, is on the back foot. I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. Nielsen obviously is in the GT1 class, so he has little to play in the GT2 battle. But being involved, trying to avoid that wreck early on in the race, he's already 28 seconds behind the race leader. But Suleiman into the lead of this race. Eric Verdorf has taken second, and I believe that John Malia lines up into third, but he's coming under pressure now from Toby Bushnell, who looks as though he is on the charge. So just as you were saying that, Jeffrey, it looks as though Kimo did want to lead this race, and he just put just enough pressure on Malia, not only to be able to get the pass, but also force Malia into a mistake and give himself a bit of breathing space.
Yeah, putting pressure on somebody always helps, of course.
And not only that, Kimo is immediately driving away from Verdorf. I mean, the gap now is a good 3 seconds between the two. Malia is going to be eager to try and get past Verdorf, but it looks as though those two are pretty evenly matched. I did say how Verdorf had fallen to about 3 seconds behind, but now Verdorf has managed to get himself into second position in class. I think that he could be sniffing an opportunity here, and he'll be defending as much as he can from that number 82 Bridgestone machine. And meanwhile, out front in the GT1 class, Kieran Peace is still leading. The gap kind of stabilised at less than under a second between Peace and Manzar. Peterson is still third, less than 1.5 seconds behind the race leader. Oliver Brandt, as we've seen so many times, is just sat there in fourth, patiently waiting, probably doing what he normally does and saving a little bit of fuel so that he can charge later on in the race. This track is so difficult on the tyres as well. As you see, Peterson taking a very interesting line into that corner as they come onto the backstretch. I'm a little bit concerned that he might have just gone a little bit too wide as he flicked it left and had to correct. That pushed him a little bit further back with Manzar, but Brandt wasn't quite there to take the opportunity. And I'll tell you what, there's a very interesting battle going on at the moment between Jasper Groeneweg and Simon Geimer in the GT2 class. Groeneweg in the TNT number 77 machine, putting all sorts of pressure on that number 57 machine. Geimer doing a really good job of being able to keep that position at the moment. This is in the midfield of the GT2 class, and in this position, every point literally does count. There's only really 1 point difference from what you'd be able to get from, say, 7th down to 8th position, but the midfield battle in that GT2 class is so evenly sprung out, with 15th through to 20th separated by just 6 points, that these guys know that they've got a good opportunity to get a bit of a points haul and they're just going for it hammer and tong at the moment.
Kieran Peace is running a bit faster than the car number 2, 3 and 4, so he's running a little bit of a gap right now.
Yeah, it does look as though Peace has been able to pull out a little bit in that last lap. Manzar, we've seen him all season long being very good at charging down drivers, but as he gets up behind him, he does get a little bit, sometimes gets a little bit aggressive, sometimes just loses a little bit of focus and drops back. But as you see him there, really spinning the tyres as he came through that right-hand part of the chicane.
And Oliver Brand just made a move on David S. Peterson.
So the championship leader overtakes second position of the championship, Oliver Brand on David Peterson, and that is the battle for third position. This is about now when you normally see Oliver Brand starting to pick off his opponents one by one. Expect Brand to defend that position and also try and close down that gap to Farouk Manzar in the number 46 machine, as Oliver Brand is starting to get himself wound up. As we're just under 20 minutes into this race, this is normally the time that you start to see Bram really starting to put pressure on. He's allowed himself to keep his tyres going for maybe another 3 or 4 laps, so he can do that beautiful manoeuvre he does every pit stop, managing to charge for a good 3 or 4 laps and then being able to come out in front of other drivers. Expect him to do the same thing here today in that number 91 Vitaphone machine.
Kimo Suminen has pulled a big gap now.
Yeah, that gap is up to almost 4 seconds. What we're going to do, as the race settles down just a little bit, I'm going to bring our resident tech expert, Yoni Bachman, into the booth. Yoni, nighttime racing here at Sebring is so difficult. Just take us through a couple of the additional challenges that the drivers have to face when racing in the dark.
Well, first and foremost, I would say that the night track not just provide difficulties, but it also provides more grip. Since the nighttime it's a bit chillier and there's lots more grip on the track, and we see already in the GT2 qualifying, Kimmo Suominen did for the World Tour event on Sebring. His qualifying lap was 58.3 something, and right now he did a 57.8, so the track is in a night layout, it's a half a second to a second faster than on the daytime. But yeah, the difficult part is that if you get, let's say you get comfortable around the daytime of Sebring, you do like 200 laps around daytime, and then you get lights out and you go to the night mode, and the first 1 hour you go like, what is this? Because you basically lose all your previous brake markers. You have to rely on to see that where the track is. You have to follow the shiny dots, like you said, the landing markers and the small lamps around the track. You have to rely on those to see to get your braking points right, to get your turning points right, and like we can see in the screen, the headlights, section of the track that is being lighted by the headlights of the cars is not that wide, especially if you go into a 180-degree turn. You can't really see the exit of the turn in any possible way before your car is pointing out that direction. So you have to be very comfortable around the night layout in order to get all the benefits from the extra grip.
And just very quickly, Oliver Bryant is really closing down Farouk Manzar in that number 46 machine. He's managed to get himself around Peterson. We said that just a couple of laps ago, and Peterson has trailed back to second behind Oliver Bryant now. So this will be encouraging for Bryant as he gets himself into an even more commanding position in the championship. But Yoni, you were a big defender of the daytime layout in relation to the World Tour event tomorrow, and was that directly because of what we saw on these starts and lack of visibility of just how difficult it is for the drivers to get their points and to see exactly where the edge of the curbs are as they come out of these corners?
Yeah, that's exactly the reason why I was such a, or I still am a big supporter of the daytime choice for the World Tour event, because lots of, unlike in the TFR races or normal Proto GT series, where lots of, or the majority of the drivers are comfortable with the cars. They know all the tracks, different layouts, even though they might be slow, they might be fast, anything, but they're still comfortable with this with the combinations. As we see at the same time, Oliver Brandt has his moments coming out of turn 1. But yeah, that's that lap 1 collision or mayhem, should we say. That was exactly the reason why I wanted the daytime race, because I know for a fact that if you put 43 cars in a full grid in a race where a lot of the fast guys might be running HPD, but they never witnessed multi-class racing, they've never seen Sebring on night, they are otherwise uncomfortable with the track, etc., etc. All that piles up to what we just saw, and these guys know the layout, they know the cars, they know the track, and still that happened. You can just take a wild guess what would happen if you put rookies and inexperienced people on this track.
Yeah, and I was just having a look back at Oliver Brandt, very close to slamming it into the wall there, getting all sorts of squirrely as they came out of turn number 1, running onto the grass, and amazing car control. I'm sure he was taking a leaf out of Kimi Räikkönen qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix early on today. But it's enabled him, enabled Farouk Manzar a little bit of breathing space, just for the moment, and allowed Peterson to catch up just a tiny little bit, as Peterson gets all sorts of wheels over the curbs. Has to be very careful to make sure he doesn't get himself a slow down penalty. But popping back over to the GT2 momentarily, I know Rob Sutherland always talked about it more than I do, so I've got to make sure in his absence that a lot is talked about the GT2. Kimbo Zimmerman is leading the way, up to 6 seconds now to Eric Verdorf. John Mallia is still hunting down that number 94 machine in 3rd. Toby Bushnell in 4th. He's dropped back to 3 seconds behind that battle for 2nd position. Daniel Kersen rounds out your top 5, but still the battle between Simon Geimer and Jasper Groeneweg is continuing. Groeneweg's managed to get past Geimer. That's the battle for 6th position, but Geimer's not letting him drive away, getting really close in some of these braking zones and putting a lot of pressure to try and take that 6th position back.
And on the back of the field, Peter Kiermaier made a move on the inside of turn 1 on Mario Vlasic.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And Mario
they
Vlasic
are
getting
battling for
wide.
position 17 and 18.
Yeah, Mario Vlasic getting very, very squirrely as they come out of turn number 12. Having to be very, and these 4 GTs that have so much power, same with the Corvette, but not a lot of aerodynamic grip, and that means that these drivers have to be so careful as they get onto the power. For those of you just tuning in, hello and welcome to round 7 of the TFR Spring Super Cup from Sebring International Raceway. Story of the day is simple as this: a huge crash in turn 1, taking out a number of drivers, including Adam Kell and David Ward, who are looking to get a really strong finish here. I know David Ward especially will be disappointed. He entered this race 3rd in points in that number 69 machine. He's going to lose a lot of momentum, which we talked about at the start of this race. But Adam Kell as well, I knew that he wanted to put on a big charge in the second half of the season. He's out of the race, as Witker Bubenek, Lasse Bryn Hansen, Bart Monnen, Robert Lowry and Michael Oath, Christian Schick. So far we currently have 22 cars on the lead lap. William Panay is the first car 1 lap down. And sorry, I have to say, David Ward is back in the race, but he is circulating 8 laps down. I think for Ward, he knows that he can still get a couple of points out of this race to try and consolidate his position, especially the fact that this is one of the smallest GT1 fields that we've had in quite a while, despite the fact that we have a good 31 drivers who entered this race. And looking back to the GT2 class, Oliver Brandt, I had to say, is really pushing, as there's a car running very wide as they came down underneath the Mobile 1 bridge. That was Larry Krupp, who almost collected Farouk Manzar as he came round that sweeping right-hander. Just having a look back, Larry Krupp just trying to make way for Oliver Brandt, got himself offline just a little bit, and then gets himself onto the grass into that double apex right-hander. And tell you what, a couple of those drivers' heart rates would have gone up quite a bit. As meanwhile, I believe that Peterson has managed to get back around Oliver Brandt. That is the battle for third position. Having a look back at how it happened, he just did a perfect crossover. Got himself to the outside, forced Oliver Brandt to literally check up just a little bit. Peterson back into the third position, and I'll tell you what, the battle for third position, they know, these drivers, that more than anything else, they are racing each other for this championship right now. And so Peterson goes off track just a little bit after that. So Peterson off track, and this will allow Oliver Brandt to possibly make a move. But Oliver just kept it a little bit cautious, didn't have the opportunity to maximise that. And Brandt now is hoping that might have just disturbed Peterson a little bit so he can close that gap back up. Meanwhile, this ding-dong battle has allowed Kieran Peace to accelerate to a 2.5 second gap over this duo. Farouk Manzar is just 0.8 behind the race leader, but these two are driving away, Jeffrey. And if you're third or fourth place car, the last thing you want to do is start getting involved in a battle and let the leader drive away ahead of you.
Car number 94, Eric Veidorf, spun off.
And that is disappointing for Veidorf. He was
kept
second.
under pressure by John Malia, and the pressure building was good because car number 94 made a mistake. So John Malia is now in position 11.
Just as with what we saw earlier with one of the other drivers in the GT2 class, Peter Kaimeyer, just literally getting a little bit more than the two wheels on the curb, putting a little bit onto the grass, and as soon as you get onto the grass on these cars and you put the power down, it's pretty much game over for you. He's got a lot of right side suspension damage to his race car. He's bringing it down the backstretch now into the final corner. We're looking to see if he comes down pit lane. He's doing a very, very tight apex, but keeping it on the racetrack for the moment. And we'll bring Yoni back into this one. Yoni, I'm guessing this is what you were talking about the nighttime layout. A lot less margin for error, especially as you can't really see as much out of the side of the car as you would by day.
Yeah, I've that corner that we call the tower corner, the T12. That's the one that I've had the most problem with throughout this week. The problem is that you come in there in the Ford GT, you come with a fourth gear, almost flat out, but you don't have time to change up into fifth because you then immediately have to go drop down into second gear. And what happens is that if you just the corner is just so deceiving, because first it gives you an impression of, yeah, I have lots of time to brakes and stuff like that. All of a sudden you feel on your wheel there's a huge bump right at the turning point, and as you hit that, if you're still on the brakes, your car just keeps pushing and it doesn't slow down anymore. What happens if you either go off track or then you have to slow down just to avoid that curve that we saw Eric Veidorf touching. And when you touch that curve, it's like going on ice. There's like completely zero grip if you're flat out trying to exit that corner. It's an instant spin like we saw.
So Veidorf is going to see whether he can drive what is a slightly damaged race car now back up through the field. He was running in second until that moment, and that has allowed Toby Bushnell to get himself up into second in class. Daniel Kirsten is currently running third in the GT2s, Eric Veidorf in fourth. And I tell you what though, it does look as though that Bushnell and Kirsten are going to end up having a great battle. Kirsten putting all forms of pressure onto Bushnell to try and close that gap. It's currently sat at just 8 tenths of a second.
The GT2 class leader is still Kimmo Sumoen, and followed by Toby Bushnell and Daniel Kirsten third.
And Oliver Brandt has managed to get himself back around David Peterson in the battle for third position. These two drivers really going at it. And as I said, you know, these two drivers, they know that the biggest point is for the win. However, for Oliver Brandt, he knows that all he has to do is get himself ahead of Peterson every single race, and pretty much he's in the best position for the championship. And that was a beautiful manoeuvre into that hairpin, just a little bit late onto the brakes, dive down to the inside line, hold it down, and as soon as you got that inside line, it's very difficult for the car on the outside to try and do the cut over. It's pretty much single file from the middle of that apex. So just over 30 minutes into round 7 of the TFR Super Cup presented by Glacier TV. TFR Spring Super Cup, we've done half the season so far, and to quote the famous Murray Walker, there's still half the season left to go, and I tell you what, this is a great battle going on all the way throughout the racetrack. Best battle on the track so far, I have to say, has to be that of the number 16 machine of David Peterson, currently running 4th, who's had a battle with Oliver Brandt from the drop of the green flag. Brandt is currently running in 3rd in that number 91 Vitaphone machine, but I expect those positions to change a little bit more, as Peterson, I think this is what he likes the most. He likes it when he's not driving away into the distance. He's got a car ahead of him. He knows where his target is. He knows exactly what to do, you know, to beat his competition. It's as simple as this: overtake Oliver Brandt and keep it on the racetrack. And I tell you what, Kimmo Suerman is doing an amazing job yet again. He has been so dominant in this GT2 class all season long. Having a look back through his results, all you can see is wins everywhere. The only race that he didn't win so far this season was Road America, where he had his contact with Toby Bushnell at just after the halfway point. Apart from that, it has been victories all the way for Kimmo in that Aeon machine, which has been absolutely dominant all season long. And I know a number of drivers are looking to get their hands on him in the World Tour event tomorrow. But I tell you what, Kimmo, if he's doing anything like the job he's doing now, he is going to be in really good form for the iRacing World Tour event at Sebring tomorrow and the daytime layout, which of course, as always, will be presented by Glacier TV in stunning high definition. No 5.1 audio for you Sky Sports fans, unfortunately, but still the HD-ness.
Currently there's an interesting battle going on for the GT2 class, position 2, and with Toby Bushell and Daniel Kirsten.
Yeah, and Toby Bushnell looking to have a stronger second half of the season. Didn't race at Spa-Francorchamps and has had some good finishes elsewhere. A little bit let down last time out at Laguna Seca. He only came 8th, and obviously at Mid-Ohio he had his incident as well. Came home 13th but didn't score points on the TFR rules. You have to make sure that you complete 50% of race distance, and David Peterson has made a little bit of a mistake in that number 16 machine. That put him a lot further behind Oliver Brandt, even getting it loose into turn number 2. Again, clipping that right hand, the right hand grass on apex. You just can't see where these apexes are as much on the nighttime layout, and that allowed Brandt to drive away to about 1.5 seconds, if not 2 seconds. So that has allowed Oliver Brandt to now start concentrating on charging down Farouk Manzar and then Kieran Peace to get himself out towards this race lead. But as you were talking about, Jeffrey, in the GT2 class, the battle for second position, Toby Bushnell in the TFR machine, we were talking about having a very strong season, but trying to get himself back up into the championship hunt, being hunted down by Daniel Kirsten. And again, this is a battle for championship position, with Kirsten on 56 points, Bushnell in 53. If Bushnell can finish ahead, he will take 5th position in this championship.
Yeah, Daniel Kirsten is really building up the tension, and it's a very good battle so far. And let's see if Toby Bushell has the nerves to keep it cool and had Daniel Kirsten behind him with the car number 59.
And let's not forget, Bushnell is a wily old fox in that TFR number 31 machine. He knows how to handle a ton of pressure, and he will be doing everything he knows to make that car as wide as possible within the rules. Looks as though he's a lot better on acceleration out of the slower to medium speed corners, but it looks as though Kirsten's a little bit faster as they go through these sweeping bends. But when you consider the places that you need to be strongest on this racetrack, you're going to want it into these big braking zones, and it looks as though that is where Bushnell is stronger.
Farouk Manzar still has a few of Kieran Peace battling for position 1. Well, battling.
And I tell you what, that gap's going to get a lot closer momentarily as they start to come and lap from the GT2 cars. And you see just how much time Oliver Brandt is losing as he's trying to put a lap on Dave Greimer and Mario Vlasic. Mario Vlasic currently running in 17th position overall with Dave Geimer right behind him. So they're fighting for position. And as you see there...
they're going too wide.
Yeah, and it's
this is tight.
Farouk Manzar literally uses to his advantage. He's managed to close that gap down to less than half a second as they come down this backstretch. Kieran Peace is going to hope that these GT2 drivers are going to let him pass eventually. But the thing is, look, he's going to almost have to go 3 wide to come to the final corner as Geimer moves to the inside. Vlasic stays on the outside. Kieran Peace having to make a move on the outside of the final corner. And it looks like Manzar is going to get himself a bit of a lucky break there as he can overtake Geimer on the straightaway as we're completing lap number 19. Let's see whether or not they can both get around into turn number 1. Almost cutting him off there. Very close to contact between Kieran Peace and Maria Vlasic as William Perneer's coming into the picture as well, having run right in turn 1.
Oh, they hit each other.
Yeah, contact. And this is allowing Oliver Brandt to close right back up to these two as they come down the long back stretch. You see Kieran Peace was on the outside line, traffic all over, and Farouk Manzar managed to inherit the race lead as a result of that. And it shows that you can gain yourself a good 2-second lead, but if the traffic doesn't go your way, the field will close right back amongst you. And I tell you what, Oliver Brandt, now this is exactly what he wanted, as he's managed to close that gap to just under 3 seconds, and it looks as though he's going to get himself an easy go through this traffic as Dave Geimer just lets him through. And so Oliver Brandt almost getting it onto the grass, having to be very careful as he comes round on the outside, clipping the grass a little bit. This has allowed Farouk Manzar to gain himself about a 2-second gap, but now Oliver Brandt can smell his next target in Kieran Peace. The gap is down to less than 2.5 seconds, and Oliver Brandt is really on the move now. We'll bring in Yoni Backman once again. Yoni, I want to ask you 2 questions. The first one is, with all of these cars running that same kind of like yellowy glow to their race car, different from the HPD, so it's not as easy to tell what car's coming up behind you. Oliver Brandt having to go all the way down towards the wall as he comes into the final corner there. He is on the charge, putting a lap on Mario Vlasic in the GT2 car. But Yoni, just how difficult is it to tell who's behind you when all you can see is a bit of a glow in your headlights?
You can't. The only real method to indicate who's behind you when you go on the straights and or similar, if it's not an HPD, I mean that's an easy one to recognize in the mirrors. But if you have a GT and a Corvette right behind you, and you have to keep fighting the whole time, so you really don't have time to just sit there and keep your eye on only on the rear view mirror. The only way to tell the difference is by pressing F3 and just using your in-car information board to see all the relative gaps on the track compared to each other. And that's the only method really, because before the car is actually right beside you, the only thing you can actually see are those headlights.
And the one thing you don't want to be doing as you're locked into a fierce battle with another driver is diverting your attention away from the wheel to have a look at that in-car information, because you haven't got the spotter. As Kieran Peace spinning out! Kieran Peace into the wall from that number 78 machine from 2nd position. Got himself a little bit of rear wing damage there, but he's going to be losing himself all sorts of time. Kieran Peace, just as they came through, I believe that was turn number 10. I need to go back and have a look, but Kieran Peace into the wall. Sorry, turn 12, you were talking about that earlier, but that is a huge disappointment there for Kieran Peace in that number 78 machine.
Yeah, that's exactly what I kept saying. That's the problem I had personally through the whole week. That corner is so deceiving because he went to the brakes pretty much normally, but if you manage to hit that bump while you're heavily on the brakes, that's what happens. Your car simply refuses to slow down enough for you to turn into that corner, and then that's what happens. Or if you're lucky, you can survive with an off track, you keep your car straight, but that loses you a good 3 or 4 seconds.
And you see a car coming down pit lane. That is Mario Vlasic in the number 2 machine coming down pit lane. The second question I want to ask you is about turn 1 and the final corner here at Sebring. two very interesting corners. So many different lines to take them. And you can run wide in turn one, wide in the final corner. But how difficult is it to connect the perfect apex lap after lap?
Well, turn 1 is actually, well, I can only speak from personal aspect, naturally, but turn 1 I pretty much nailed the correct line. I know exactly where to turn in, I know exactly where to drop down gears, what gear to take, when to go on the throttle. Turn 1 is very straightforward if you manage to get the turn in right. If you fail your turn in like a one car width, and you leave one car width between you and the T1 apex, what can happen is if you maintain a normal pace through that corner, the outside line is so bumpy that actually the car stops. All of a sudden, it just stops to turn in and starts pushing like a maniac towards the exit, and you end up going over the sand very deep, which is not that crucial in terms of hitting the walls or anything, but you have to be very cautious coming back through from that sand, just because there's curves and the tarmac edge, and the car can bounce off quite a bit. But turn 1 is pretty straightforward in my opinion. On the other hand, the last turn has, as we see Farouk Manzar coming at the last turn right now, the 2 wide with the Ford GT. This corner actually has 1,500,373 different lines through there, because you can basically take whatever line you wish. There are like 10 to 15 combinations to take that if you want to lose, if you can afford to lose like 1 or 10 to 2/10 of a second from your normal racing speed. But if you want to nail that corner, there's really only one solid line, and you have to you cannot take a wide entry because the GTs the GT cars won't turn in that well. So you have to turn in early, yet not too early, because if you go approach the first apex too early, you're gonna miss the second apex, which is the crucial one. But if you go in late and you hit the first and last apex right as you should, then you have problems with going on the throttle, because the last corner is full, and I mean full, of bumps.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been practicing for the 120 minutes of Sebring tomorrow in the HPD, and even in that car, the bumps in that final corner really does upset the handling of the car in that. So I could not even begin to wonder what it feels like in the Corvette or the Ford GT. Tell you what though, Oliver Brandt in that number 91 Vitaphone machine really is hunting down Farouk Manzar in the number 46 as Farouk gets all squirty there and has to lose a lot of momentum. That's going to allow Oliver Brandt to close down even further. And we've seen this so often in this TFR Spring Super Cup, where Oliver Brandt just holds it back as Farouk goes wide yet again. He's going to get himself a slow down penalty for that. So he's going to be very slow on the apex of this corner as he comes down the backstretch. Looks as though he's going to be able to get away with just lifting off the throttle a little bit. As you see, he has to slow down. This is going to allow Oliver Brandt to close right up to Farouk Manzar in that number 46 machine as Farouk comes into the final corner. Pit stops are approaching, and this is a time that Oliver Brandt really does put the hammer down. And you can see the gap now from 3.2 seconds last time by as they come across the line to complete lap number 22. That gap is now down to exactly 0.5 of a second. And I tell you what, Oliver Brandt is the king of putting pressure onto another driver. As you see again, Farouk running wide on the exit of turn number 1. And Farouk, this is the time that we say pressure is the most important time for you to drive under pressure. And Oliver Brandt now just needs to put a little bit more on. As you see, this is the opportunity immediately. Oliver Brandt going to the outside as they come through this right-hand sweep. Down straight away into the corner, and Oliver Brandt takes the lead here, and this will be just what Oliver Brandt will be after as he comes to take the race lead. David Peterson, his championship contender, has already pitted in the number 16, so he's out the picture for the moment. Meanwhile, out front, Oliver Brandt doing what he does best, and that is leading here in that number 91 Vitaphone car.
In the meantime, Kimmo Sumoin, the leader of the GT2 class, has a very comfortable lead of I think 12 seconds of position 2 and 3, while position 2 and 3, Toby Bushell and Daniel Christian are still fighting for that position 2.
Yeah, we talked about that. That is not only a battle for position, that's a battle for 5th in the championship. But you see Toby Bushnell coming down pit lane, so he'll be the first to blink of the GT2 cars. In the top 3, Toby Bushnell coming down pit lane. He'll be getting his service, 4 fresh tyres, filling up the car with virtual Sunoco race gas. So this will give Daniel Kirsten a little bit of breathing space. And if he can put the hammer down for the next couple of laps, he might just be able to get out ahead of Bushnell with a little bit of a gap as they come through to complete the pit sequence.
And Manser, the car number 46, was holding position 2, is now entering the pit.
So he's blinking first out of the top 2 in the GT1 class. So let's see how he does on his pit stop into his pit box. Very close to the pit wall, I have to say that. He'll be getting himself 4 fresh tyres and topping up with race gas. And this will allow Oliver Brandt to charge like he does every single race in the GT1 class. At the moment, Oliver Brandt is your race leader. Kieran Peets has managed to get himself back into 2nd position momentarily. As he collects just a little bit there with Jasper Groeneweg, who in the number 77, who's losing all form of time as a consequence of that. It looked as though, to be blatantly honest, Kieran Peets just turned in a little bit too early. Didn't expect Jasper Groeneweg to take the line that he was, and two very lucky there to avoid some serious contact. So keeping an eye on Oliver Brandt, your race leader. We know Oliver Brandt normally starts with a heavier fuel load in the car. Also very good at preserving his tyres, preserving his fuel. In most of the races this season, he's been able to go a good 4 or 5 laps longer than the field. That might be slightly shorter here due to the length and nature of this racetrack. But we'll be keeping an eye as Oliver Brandt comes to complete lap 54. We're over halfway in to round 7 of the TFR Spring Super Cup presented by Glacier TV. And I tell you what, the most important thing is, as you see more cars in pit lane, Christian Nielsen, Kimmo Surman, your race leader in the GT2 class, Daniel Kirsten and Sasha Rebe and Gary Hickman, Jasper Groeneweg, Peter Kaimeyer, Ian Rogers, all down into pit lane. Oliver Brandt just loves charging around this racetrack when he's up front. And Jeffrey, you have to do quite a lot of pit stops in the series you race in, the IndyCar. How much pressure is there coming into pit lane on what essentially is a green flag pit stop?
It's a lot of pressure. You need to be in your braking points before you're entering the pits. Otherwise, of course, you will receive an end of line or a black flag penalty. So the pressure there is very high, especially, for example, if you are battling for position and you are going into the pit earlier than the guy you are battling with.
And not only that, coming out of pit lane, you've been racing for a good 40-45 minutes. Intense concentration on the racetrack. Stop down to pit lane, had a drink of water, done whatever you needed to do, reset your fuel calculations. How easy is it to lose concentration on that lap when you come out of pit lane with cold tyres, as you have to bring the car back into speed and get back into that rhythm?
Yeah, you need to be top of your game. I also spun out. I'm talking about spinning. Chris Petridge spun out twice. The car number 32 for position 21. I'm not sure if he already pitted though.
It does look as though he is having a horrible day in that Ford GT Radical Racing machine. He has, by the look of it, had a very difficult day. Some very fast laps from him, but it does look as though he's having difficulties with the consistency and being able to get to grips with this nighttime layout, where you can see a lot less, and that leaves so much less margin for error. But to quantify it, his fastest lap time is only a 2:04, and in this race, and let's compare that to driver Kimmo Surman, who's been able to get into the 1:58, and obviously he did the 1 minute 57.4 in qualifying. So for all of you people joining the race, welcome to round 7 of the TFR Spring Super Cup, presented by Glacier TV. Will Vincent, Jeffrey Kohlberg and Yodi Backman in the booth, and it's the same old story really out front. Oliver Brandt is your race leader. Need we say any more? Of course we do. Number of incidences at the start of this race, eliminating a good number of drivers. Retirees are Witt Kabupnek, Adam Kell, Lasse Grun Hansen, Bart Monin, Robert Lowry, Michael Orff and Christian Schick. David Ward was circulating on the racetrack, however his number 69 machine is out for the day. John Mallier is also a retirement from this race, and that leaves really just 9 cars in the GT1 class on the main bunch of the field. Christian Nielsen is 9th in the GT1. He's, however, 1 lap down. Oliver Brandt doing a sterling job out front. Just looking at him coming through the final corner once again. And as we said before, he stayed out now for, I believe, 4 laps longer than the rest of the field. As he does every race long, you see him taking it a little bit easier at the start of this race, knowing that he can just cruise around, keep his position, and now he's just absolutely charging. It's astonishing to see the pace that Oliver Brandt has in the middle sector of this race. To compare his lap times, his fastest is a 1 minute 55.5. Compare that to current second place driver Kieran Peace, it's a 1 minute 55.6. But his lap times in the middle stint of this race is so much faster. It's Oliver Brandt doing some beautiful lap times. Literally all separated his last 8 laps separated by less than 1 second. That, Jeffrey, is consistency.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we were just talking about pit stops and about pressure. We were looking at the battle for P2 at the GT2 class with Toby Bushell and Daniel Kirsten. They were battling for P2, and I think they have now a gap of let's say 8 seconds.
Yeah, so I thought personally that Daniel Kirsten was getting ready to get the jump on Bushell through that sequence of pit stops, but it looks as though that TFR number 31 machine of Bushnell racing for Club England has been able to get himself a good gap in that battle for second position. And for Bushnell, that is encouraging thoughts for him, because he knows that Kimmo Surman is pretty much untouchable up front, but him being able to reclaim second position in this race will definitely leapfrog him ahead of Daniel Kirsten in that battle in the GT2 class, and also close the gap to that battle for third between Peter Kaimeyer and Eric Verdorf. Kaimeyer having a difficult day here today, and Verdorf currently set in 4th position in class.
Currently Oliver Brandt is in the pit.
Yeah, Oliver Brandt down pit lane, as well as Larry Krupp. Having a look back, Kieran Peace is also in pit lane, so this will be your standard race of pit lane. The gap across the line last time by was 5.5 seconds, so we expect Oliver Brandt to be able to just drive away from Kieran, and we'll keep an eye on these two. Oliver Brandt has a little bit of a mistake as he comes into his pit box, having to reverse the car a little bit. We'll see just how much time that loses him, but it does look as though he overshot his pit box by a small margin, but had to reverse it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting who's going to win the pit game between Kieran Peace and Oliver Brandt.
Oliver Brandt manages to get out ahead of Kieran Peace. We thought that was going to be pretty easy, but looking back to see Kieran Peace, Oliver Brandt is actually gaining himself about half a second there, somehow. Oliver Brandt rejoining the racetrack, got to be very careful as you blend in. He is back onto the racetrack, and I tell you what, David Peterson is ahead of him. David Peterson in the number 16 TFR machine has somehow managed to get himself ahead of Oliver Brandt through the sequence of pit stops. We've seen Peterson do these off-strategy games before, and it's just worked beautifully for Peterson. He's been able to keep out of the way of this traffic for quite a while now, and it looks as though he is going to inherit the race lead. I'll tell you what, though, if Oliver Brown can just keep it together for, as he's going immediately on the attack to almost 3 wide as they went through 12 there, almost collecting each other. If Oliver Brown can just keep it together for this next lap as he goes wide a little bit again, if we can keep it together for the rest of this lap, warm his tyres up, he will be on a lot fresher rubber as he's going to be making a move down to the outside as they come through this double left-hand apex. Is Peterson going to yield? Oliver Brown onto the outside. This is using every single little bit of the racing service. Oliver Brown takes the lead back from Peterson immediately as he comes out of pit lane. Fantastic manoeuvre there. One of the best manoeuvres I have seen all season long in here on the outside of that double apex left-hander. Just brilliant manoeuvre. Just astounding. Yoni Bachmann was just commentating in my ear about how the fresh tyres would have helped Oliver Brown. But Yoni, that was a tremendous overtake.
Yeah, that was a nice slingshot that he got for David coming out of the tower turn, as we see a GT2 car spinning right in front of David. But yeah, David made a small mistake with the old tires coming out of the tower turn, and yeah, excellent run on him, but I would never imagine that Oliver would have just finished that move on the outside. I mean, coming into the SS, which is the next corner, he had an awful line going into the braking zone, and still he managed to get his car to turn in. That was an insane move. But at the same time, having said that, in both Ford GTs and the Corvettes, the initial outlap is so freaking fast. I mean, in comparison, if a GT driver can do, let's say, 2 minutes 2 seconds in a race trim on daytime, he takes a fresh tire set. His first lap will be near 2 minute 0.5, so it's like 1.5 or up to 2 seconds faster when you have the fresh grip. It's only for the first lap, but it has a ton of grip.
And for Peterson, it looks as though he almost managed to make it work in that number 16 TFR machine using that off strategy, but looks as though Oliver Brown simply just got himself ahead and drives away. I'll tell you what, though, I was just having a look back at that replay. It was William Panier spinning in the GT2 class. If you'd like to know how close the gap was between Panier collecting Oliver Brown, you can measure it in feet. Let's put it that way. It was so close there, and Oliver Brown's heart rate must have just quadrupled as he came down into turn number 1, especially as the car likes to get a little bit unsettled as they go through the apex. But this is really good stuff here. David Peterson now is going to want to be trying to close down Oliver Brown in that number 91 Vitaphone machine. We talked about how good he's been for the middle sector of this race. Once again, he is doing an amazing job. Gap up to 1.6 seconds between Brown and Peterson in the GT1 class. Kieran Peace has closed down to 2.6 seconds behind the race leader. Farouk Manzar, after leading for a portion of this race, has dropped down to 8.1 seconds behind the race leader. Gary Hickman rounds out the top 5. And of the 9 cars we have still in contention in the GT1, you have, Gary Hickman, I believe, just had a moment. Gary Hickman in the number 27 machine is struggled to get down to pit lane, and his car, I believe, involved an incident in a final corner with, he hits the wall and spins it round. He almost hits the wall and spins it round to that second apex, trying to avoid it, and then I believe he hits Eric Verdorf in the GT2 class. So Gary Hickman, who had worked his way up into the 6th position in that GT1 class, now down pit lane trying to get extensive damage to repaired on that race car. That allows Steven Van Helsdingen to take 6th. Jason Brown 7th. Gary Hickman's currently scored as 9th, but Christian Nielsen will... Gary Hickman currently scored an 8th, but Christian Nielsen will take that position, dropping Hickman at least down into 9th position. And you're having a look at the moment of that battle for 3rd position. Kieran Peace closing down David Peterson. And when I say closing down, really closing down, Kieran Peace has managed to work his way back into contention for 2nd position here at Sebring, as Peterson's going a little bit wide. You see the different lines you're talking about. Yoni was talking about earlier, there's 1,500,473 or something he said lines. and really is closing down the gap as they cross the line. Is now down to under 1 second. So Kieran Peace ate 0.3 of a second out of that gap as they came across the line last time by. And meanwhile, Oliver Brandt is stretching that lead out to 1.7 seconds, but not getting away dramatically by any matter of means.
Kimo Simonin is comfortably leading the GT2 class, with Toby Bushel in P2 and Daniel Kirsten P3, Eric Veidorf in P4 and Peter Kiermaier in P5.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the lap times of Eric Veidorf. As I stated, he was involved in that incident with Hickman. His lap times look as though they've not really taken that much of a suffering. He lost 3 seconds in that incident, but since then, right back to the 2-minute flat mark. So it looks as though he got away there very luckily. Tell you what, Peace is really just hunting down Peterson, trying to put pressure upon him as they come through the middle sector of this racetrack. Does look as though Peace is very, very good on the power at the moment. That will come in very useful, especially as they come through this section of corners. This right, left, right flick as they come down onto the final backstretch. And it does look as though, you notice how Peterson takes a very different line into that final right-hander to make the turning angle less severe. He just literally runs the car further to the left and turns it to the right. Not many drivers seem to be doing that, but Peterson does manage to make it work, and it makes him have a very good launch onto that backstretch coming into the final corner.
I'm looking at lap times between Toby Bushnell and Daniel Kirsten, and it seems that Kirsten with the car number 59 is 1 second faster than position 2 Toby Bushnell. So it's going to be interesting with the 25 minutes left if he's going to steal the P2 from Toby Bushnell.
Yeah, so with 1 hour complete here of round 7 of the TFR Spring Super Cup, you see Chris Partridge again in that number 32 Radical Racing 4 GT having a number of issues. He is currently scored in the GT2 class as, I believe, 11th position, just being lapped by Farouk Manzir. He's 2 laps down. He's just racing for solitary points at the moment. But we'll bring Yoni Backman back into the booth to discuss a little bit more about cornering and that final corner of the S's. Explain what Peterson's exactly trying to achieve by running further out to the left.
Well, the corner is actually pretty very pleasant. Well, if you count out the fact that I'm struggling with it in qualifying trim, I'm actually enjoying that corner very much during the race trim, at least with the GT2s. What Peterson is trying to do, as we see when he's now approaching, we can actually have a view from him, the in-car, where we go. As we can see him right now, breaking into this first right-hander. Now he tries to get as far as right as possible, then deep into the left. And now, as you can see, when he makes a steep entry into the first right-hander, it gives him an excellent angle into the left-hander, which means that you can carry a lot more speed, and the car is much more balanced going into that right-hander. And that's actually a preferred line around the racetrack. But what happens is, if you just miss the first out of the 3 corners, the first right-hander, you miss the entry point just a bit. It doesn't spoil your lap, it doesn't spoil your race in any way, except it ruins your possibility of making your car to turn in as effectively as you would like to the next left-hander. And if you then try to initialize that move that David Peterson is successfully doing in the last right-hander, so you go deep into the left, then brake, then turn into the right and carry much more speed, get a better exit to the back straight. If you try to do that with the less successful entry into that left-hander, what happens is, when you need to go on the brakes just a bit in order to get the car to turn in, your car is still not balanced from that last left-hander turn in, and that happens. That causes the rear end to get very sideways. And if you get it sideways, then you're in a serious danger of losing off-track, black flag, 2 seconds, you name it.
Yeah, as we saw, that was one of the issues that Farouk Manzar had earlier on in this race, which essentially cost him the lead in that number 48. Is he got himself a cutting corner penalty, had to slow down the backstretch. That allowed Oliver Brandt to catch him up as they came into the final corner, and then the amount of pressure he was under, trying to gap himself back, just enabled Oliver Brandt to pressure him into making a nice manoeuvre. Currently still watching that battle for second in the GT1 class. Kieran Peace still applying the pressure onto Peterson. And I tell you what, it just shows as Peace is slightly less comfortable in this final sector of the racetrack. Peterson is just so good as to come into the straightaway that even if Peace can nail that right flick, Peterson just gets such a good drive into the final corner, which sets him up beautifully for the start of the next lap.
Yeah, that's like I said, there's 100 ways around this track or more, but yeah, Peterson has really managed to nail his setup with the, especially being comfortable coming out of the last corner. I mean, the Corvette is slightly more forgiving to those bumps in the last turn than the GT2. It turns in much better, but you always have to be concerned with since the GT has the Corvette has an immense amount of torque, and it has a lot more horsepower, so you have to be worried about when you go on the throttle over the bumps. Even though the car accepts to turn in, it actually keeps turning in after you don't want it to turn in anymore. So you really have to get your car settled in, and David has done an excellent job of setting his car up.
And I want to ask you just one more quick question. Being a GT driver yourself, with this nighttime layout, just how careful do you have to be on the throttle and have car awareness as you come out of these corners where you have to really use the curbs to maximise your lap time?
Well, I've never personally had any problems with going on the throttle. It's more like being in problems every time you go on the brakes because of the bumps in bumpy sections in almost every braking zone. But the only corners that I would say that you have to be careful with going on the throttle is the tower exit, the turn 12, which we just saw David Peterson take. If you just see that you're gonna be, we got a long
so
slide. Yeah, yeah. Just so I was saying that that's not one of the places that you would expect someone to spin, because that's basically a flat out all left turn in. But the tower turn is extremely tricky. If you notice that you're gonna be on the curb, you just cannot go full throttle. No way. It just automatically forces you to spin. So that's the corner that you have to be really careful on. One more corner, which is very crucial to your lap time, is T10, which is the after the hairpin, the long straightaway, and the next right-hander. That's a tricky corner because it turns in tight, but at the same time it opens very early to the opposite side. So you have to get the car to turn in right as well as you can, and as soon as you get the car to turn in, you already have to go on the throttle to get maximum exit coming into the tower corner, and that gives a lot of people problems because if the car rear end is even just slightly loose, it tends to just throw it out to a slide, and when you have to correct the slide over there, it costs you 0.5 of a second, if not more.
And I think the curse of the commentators has come back, just as we were talking about running on the exit of corners and using the curb. Simon Geimer in the number 57 machine gets himself loose on the exit of that right-hander that we talked about so much today. Spins the car around, slams it into the wall. His race is unfortunately over, as we have Chris Partridge yet again involved in an incident, this time I believe into, let's have a look, into, I'm not quite sure what that is, turn 1 by the look of it. Looks as though he's straightened himself out, but Chris Partridge really not having a great day today in that Radical Racing Ford GT at number 32 machine.
Yeah, that looks like it's coming, just the braking into the turn 3, which is another tight corner around here, especially because of the braking. Like I said, almost every corner around this racetrack gives you props going into the brakes. Not on the throttle, but like we just saw, the Chris Partridge, he obviously is not happy with the setup of his car, and it does punish you every time your tires are worn off and you go to tight corners and you have to brake hard and turn in just slightly while you're on the brakes, and that's what happens.
So that battle for second position, it looks as though Peterson has been able to finally gap Kieran Peace in that number 78 machine just for the moment. It's interesting though, these top three drivers still separated by less than 5 seconds, and we are over 70 minutes into, well, just about 70 minutes into this race now. So Oliver Brandt is still your race leader, David Peterson running in second, Kieran Peace in third. Farouk Manzar is in fourth after leading early on in this race. He's still within 10 seconds of the leader as well. Ian Rogers is in fourth, Jason Brown in, Ian Rogers in fifth, Jason Brown in sixth, Stephen Van Helsingen in seventh, Christian Nielsen is a lap down in eighth. However, only 8 cars really in any form of contention in this race. We have Larry Crook, who is 2 laps down, and Gary Hickman is the first of the retirees. For those of you just joining us, to recap one more time, a huge multi-car accident as the cars came into turn 1 at the start of this race, involving a number of drivers and contenders. Witzka Bubnek, Adam Kell, Lance Brand Hansen, Bart Monin, Robert Lowry, Michael Off, Christian Schick, David Ward, all involved in that. But some horrible moments at the start of this race for a number of these drivers in both the GT1 and the GT2 class. And the fact that it wiped out so much of the GT1 field has given quite a lot of these drivers the opportunity to gain some considerable points in the hunt for the GT1 championship. But for Oliver Brandt, it's just simple as, let's lead this race once again and try and increase my gap at the top of the standings.
And in fact, while watching David Peterson right on the screens, he's actually caught Oliver Brandt 0.6 of a second in that last lap. Now 0.8 of a second.
Yeah, so it looks like this race is far from over as Peterson puts the power down once again. He's managed to shake off Peace for the moment, and it looks as though he is closing down Oliver Brandt in that number 91 machine. Whoever wins this race will lead the championship coming out of here, which is going to be key as we come into the latter part of the season. Next weekend is such a great race. Will be at Daytona International Speedway's road course. I know that quite a lot of us have commentated so much here at that racetrack, so the drivers will know it, the commentators will know it. It's going to be a case of round 2718 at Daytona International Speedway's road course. I tell you what, look at 8th position in the overall standings. Kimmo Surman just driving away from the GT2 field once again. And one thing we've forgotten to tell you about, Daniel Kirsten has managed to get himself into 2nd position in class, overtaking Toby Bushnell for that 2nd position. And this is again the battle for 5th and 6th position in the GT2 championship. And it looks as though Kirsten's going to be able to gap Bushnell. After periods of this race, it did look as though that TFR number 31 machine was going to inherit 2nd place in the race overall. Sorry, 2nd place in the race in class. So we'll keep an eye on that battle. It does look as though Bushnell is trying to catch back up to Kirsten as they try to navigate a little bit of lap traffic. I tell you what, like, Kimmo Surman has pretty much won every single race this season, with the exception of Road America, where he was involved in an incident with Bushnell as the two fought for the lead. Pretty much it was the only time even that Kimmo wasn't the dominant car by far. It looks as though he learned from that mistake back in round 2 of the series, and it's just upped his game so much that he just dominated the field. He's been faster than some of the GT1 drivers all season long. You could pretty much classify him as a GT1 driver half the time, even though he's running the 4GT.
David Peterson with the car number 16 is closing the gap between Oliver Brandt. It's going to be a really exciting end of this race.
Yeah, that gap is down to less than 1 second now, as we are currently working lap 38 here at Sebring International Raceway, just at about the 1.25 hour marks here at Sebring. And this is the point where, you know, it's go time for these drivers. They know how much grip they have left in their tyres. There's Oliver Brandt having to go wide as he overtakes the GT2 car. He's losing a lot of time there as he's trying to overtake Sasha Rebe. Will he allow Peterson to just drive by? Yes, he does. This allows Peterson to really close the gap now. That will be less than half a second as they come down into the chicane.
That is a scary position right there if you want to fly past anyone. I mean, especially if you tune in tomorrow to watch the World Tour event, the 2 hours of Sebring. Since we adding to these cars that we see right now, the Corvettes and the Ford GTs, we're going to have a much faster aerodynamic car of HPD around the racetracks, and they're about 15 seconds a lap faster than the Ford GTs. So that place especially is going to be a tricky one, letting the HPDs by, because they carry enough speed to go around you outside or inside to neither of the corners, either the left-hander or the next right-hander. And all the GTs and the Corvettes really has to be on their toes over there, because the HPDs do not lift off in any stage when they come out of that turn 10 coming towards that tower corner.
Oh yeah, unless you're me driving the HPD, they are a lot faster than the Corvette and the Ford GT cars. That race, of course, we brought to you live in its entirety on Glacier TV, the top split of the World Tour event. Glacier TV bringing you the entirety of the World Tour 2012, including some great races, including my personal favourite, the Indianapolis 500 on iRacing. Cannot wait for that race at the end of May, Memorial Weekend. Meanwhile, Oliver Brandt trying his best to open that gap up once again to David Peterson. Once you get under that 1 second mark, these cars do get the draft effect, and Peterson can use that down his long straightaways. We talked about how he is so good onto that final straightaway due to the momentum he carries through that chicane. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not Peterson will try and make a move into the final corner at any point. Heck, we could even say he might try and make a move into the final lap if he's close enough. But this battle, top 3 drivers still separated by less than 3 seconds, top 4 drivers by less than 10 seconds. It's great racing here at Sebring, and a credit to all the drivers who run this series, but especially for Oliver Brandt, David Peterson and Kieran Peace.
Yeah, that was an excellent contrast we saw right there coming to the back straightaway. David Peterson following Oliver Brandt. Oliver Brandt taking much more tighter entry into that right-hander, whereas David Peterson goes way to the left, then makes a very steep entry to the back straightaway. It carries much more speed, goes hard on the throttle since he got the car to turn in as Oliver Brandt at the moment.
This is going to open the door to David Peterson. Oliver Brandt immediately goes to the inside to come down into turn number 1. Peterson on the outside. Is he going to be able to get the job done? It looks as though Oliver Brandt lives to survive another day. He goes loose again. Peterson down to the inside. He's going to take the race lead here at Sebring. Oliver Brandt loses the lead for the first time in over 20 minutes of racing, and just as it's crunch time, Peterson re-inherits the race lead, and if Peterson can win this race, he'll be rewarded not only with 25 points, but the lead in the GT1 Championship.
Yeah, that is... Yeah, sorry about it. Just have to say that that was exactly the way that I thought it was going to go. When Oliver Brandt just turned in, he was on the inside into turn 1, which is not a bad place to be, but he just miscalculated his acceleration point, and his car just started pushing, and once you're fighting in a position, you really don't want to... The last thing you want to do is lift in the middle of a corner to save the car, so he just stayed on the throttle, just started to turn in more, and that's what happened. The rear end snaps loose, and like I said, you don't end up to a wall, but you just force yourself onto the sand, and you lose 1 or 2 seconds, and that was enough for David to capitalize.
With just over 10 minutes left to go here at Sebring, can Oliver Brandt close that gap back to David Peterson? You're watching live round 7 of the TFR Spring Super Cup on Glacier TV. We are set for an amazing finish here as David Peterson has somehow managed to take the lead back from Oliver Brandt. He made 2 big mistakes in the series of 2 corners under pressure from Peterson in the number 16. It looks as though now Oliver Brandt is going to have to be charging, hoping to use lap traffic as he can. I see the lap traffic there just diving out of the way. He knows what's on stake for these 2 drivers. Kieran Peace is just sitting there waiting for an opportunity in 3rd position. And let's not forget, Farik Manzel is only 8 seconds behind the race leader.
Dave Geimer with the car number 23 just lost his 7th position to Mario Vlasic, car number 2.
Yeah, and
I
Dave
think
Guymer.
he's last 10 laps he's building the pressure, and after 10 laps Dave Guymer just lost it and give the position to.
Sorry, you got that the wrong way around. I have to say that. So Dave Guymer gained the position of Mario Vlasic, switch it around, and you were perfect there. Guymer just putting all sorts of pressure on Vlasic in that battle in the GT2 class, and say a number of interesting battles to conclude this race. Vlasic and Guymer have been going at it all race long. In the GT1 class, let's not forget that even though things are spread out, there's still a little bit of battling going on as drivers try to close the gap. We're literally now just over 10 minutes and 30 seconds left to go of this timed race. We'll just give you an update. Sorry, Peterson almost losing it again over the rumble strips. Oliver Brandt managed to take the lead back of this race as Peterson was held up behind a Ford GT. Oliver Brandt managed to dive down to the inside, take the lead of this race back, and Peterson trying to respond, just getting the car all squirrely and losing a position back to Kieran Peace. So David Peterson in the series of one corner goes from third all the way down to third, and let's not forget, we still got 10 minutes of this race left to go. Anything can happen here at Sebring as we continue on what has been an eventful day here on Glacier TV. Lead changes galore out front. Peterson now is going to have to charge all over again, and lap traffic, Yoni, was always true to be an issue, but here at Sebring it looks as though it could determine the outcome of the race.
Yep, unfortunately, since the lap traffic always seems to come right at you during the brakes. Like I said, there's not that much of a problem going on the throttle. It's about getting on the brakes, and usually the overtakings of the slower cars, unless it's not in the middle of the straight line where the Corvettes carry much more speed, including against the HPDs. But usually the overtakings and lapping cars always occurs during the corners, and unfortunately the tight corners. Well, if they would just happen to overtake, let's say in the double left-hander before the SS, or before the turn-in of turn 1, no problems, but usually it always seems to happen at turns 2, 3, 4, 6, 10. The tricky parts always seems to be the case.
To give you a bit of an update in the GT2 cars, Daniel Kurtzen has managed to pull away from Toby Bushnell in the battle for second position, so it looks as though Kurtzen will be able to keep his 5th position in the GT2 championship. And the other battle we were looking at between Dave Guymer and Mario Vlasic, Guymer has been able to pull away from Vlasic for the time being, but let's not forget, we've had so much action in the last 10 minutes, there's still so much left to come, as now Oliver Brandt is going to have to see whether he can get around Mario Vlasic, catching him again, a very difficult time. Will this allow Kieran Peace to see if he can snatch a lead? It looks as though Oliver Brandt is going to have to make a desperate move as he goes around the outside of the corners yet again. He did this to overtake Peterson, he's going very wide, managing to get it back onto the racetrack. He'll have to be very careful, he doesn't do that too often, otherwise he will be investigated by the stewards for the amount of off-track incidences he has had. But Vlasic cutting right back down, that's held up Kieran Peace just a little bit, and meanwhile Peterson looks as though he's just waiting for an incident, waiting for one of these drivers ahead of him to keep making mistakes that he can capitalise. Looks as though he's going to be catching that Ford GT right in the apex of the final corner. So your leaders as they come into the last 7 or 8 minutes is Oliver Brandt is your race leader in the GT1 class. Kieran Peace is in second. David Peterson in third. He's going to be able to come down the inside as to come down to turn number 1 to overtake Mario Vlasic. Gets the job done pretty easy there. He was probably the luckiest of all of them. In the GT2 class, Kimo Suerman is your race leader as expected. Daniel Kurtzen in second. Toby Bushnell rounds out your top 3 in the GT2s, and there's even more traffic for Oliver Brandt, and let's hope that he can get him very, very quickly. Oliver Brandt now coming up to lap Dave Guymer. We've talked about how difficult it is to make passing manoeuvres in these slower corners, and it looks as though Oliver Brandt isn't going to be able to do it into the hairpin. He's going to have to be very careful on corner exit, see that it doesn't get held up. Kieran Peace is going to be waiting for an opportunity. Not going to happen this time by though. Oliver Brandt managed to just sweep by, and now Kieran needs to make sure he can get past him in the next couple of corners if he's going to have any chance of capitalising on any mistake from Brandt in these last few minutes.
Indeed, there's a as the counter goes to 0 on the bottom right of the screen, we do remind you of the 5 minutes and 42 seconds. This is a long pace lap with the gridding involved in the session time, so when the counter goes to 0 after 15 seconds, as you can see, add another 5 minutes and 42 seconds. So when the timer goes back up into 5:42, that's when the counter really should be 0, and that's when the leaders are going to get the white flag.
Sounds confusing. We'll talk you through it as we do every single week. If you're regular to the TFR series, I'm sure you've already had your stopwatches out for the last hour and a half or so, counting it to the second. Oliver Brandt is going to be coming up. Oliver Brandt, looks as though he has a clear track ahead of him for the next couple of corners. Jasper Groeneweg is the next guy who's going to be lapping. Looks as though it looks like literally he'll catch him in the final lap, so he's got to be very careful. Oliver Brandt, your race leader. Kieran Peace in second. David Peterson is in third. Farouk Manzar in fourth. Ian Rogers in fifth. Jason Brown in sixth. And Stephen Van Helsingen in seventh. And thankfully, it looks as though a lot of the battles in the GT2 class have sorted themselves out for the time being. So we can concentrate on this battle for the top three with, as people's been talking about for the last good 20 minutes, top three drivers separated by less than 5 seconds still. Peterson only 3.2 seconds behind the race leader. Oliver Brandt is pushing as hard as possible, knowing that he could get held up behind Jasper as he comes up to lap it, and he wants as much of a gap as possible. However, let's just be careful of let's not make a mistake like you made 15 minutes ago to cost you the race lead, especially as you won't have the chance possibly to get it back. And I'm just having a look back through the lap cars. It looks as though if they can get around Groeneweg, Peter Kiermaier currently running in 13th overall, which is 5th in the GT2s. Looks as though he's just out of the window. This is going to be difficult for Oliver Brandt. He's being held up a little bit there by the Ford GT driver. But Oliver Brandt manages to get past eventually. Jasper Groeneweg does the noble thing of just moving out of the way. Doesn't want to be the deciding factor in the outcome of this race. And it looks as though Peterson's coming down pit lane, I'm sorry. David Peterson is going to come down pit lane. And it looks as though that is going to cost him third position. Because Farouk Manzar he's pretty much gone past. So Peterson gambled on the early strategy. And it looks as though he didn't put enough fuel on the car. So David Peterson will go from third at least down to fourth, and I'm a bit worried that he could go down into fifth position, keeping an eye on Ian Rogers. He's coming through the final corner. Don't put it. Ian Rogers hit the wall just as he could inherit fourth position from Peterson. He's going to have to bring the car down pit lane himself, and that, I tell you what, is very lucky for Peterson. He's back out onto the racetrack, and a bullet completely dodged for him there.
Wow, I didn't expect that, Will, to be honest.
Well, we know that Peterson does take some very risky strategies to try and maximise his potential, and that's possibly what got him out in front by stopping early in this race. But he must have just literally calculated it wrong by one lap, as we pretty much towards the end of this race, and he's not had enough fuel to be able to make it to the end.
Yeah, I can just have a quick comment on the fuel saving thingy. I've actually tested the Ford GT quite a bit this week in terms of saving fuel versus driving at the very limit, and there's not really that much of a difference in the fuel consumption around this racetrack, and that's because there's so much flat out sections. I mean, even though you could short shift and use higher gears and go into the corners, you still have just so much flat out space around the racetrack that it really does not pay off.
Oh yeah, definitely, and as in many of the cars, you've got to be very careful when you save fuel. You can use a lot of time by doing so. This is an oval racing where you can literally just put the clutch in the corner. You've got to be, you know, on it down these straightaways. You cannot afford to lose even 5 miles an hour down the straight. As Oliver Brandt takes the white flag, one more lap to go for him. He's going to be looking to keep that gap to Kieran Peace, which was 2.2 seconds last time by. So Oliver Brandt has done a tremendous job getting back to the race lead after losing that position to David Peterson about 15 minutes ago, as Peterson was able to capitalise on 2 mistakes by Oliver Brandt. One of the few mistakes we've seen Brandt make, actually, all season long. But they came at a critical time, and he's done a great job being able to get himself back into position. Kieran Peace is in second. Farouk Manzar is going to be over the moon with inheriting 3rd position. Peterson is in 4th. He had to make a pit stop just 2 laps ago to top off on race gas, and he was very lucky to avoid going down into 5th position. However, Ian Rogers in the number 29 just hitting the wall in the final corner as he was about to come and take that position. Keeping an eye on Nico Brandt, doing a tremendous job, brings it down to complete the 2nd sector for the final time. I tell you what, there's nothing I can say about Oliver Brandt other than that was a magical couple of laps there to retake the race lead, using the opportunities presented by the lap cars to absolute perfection. 7 cars are going to be scored on the lead lap at the end of this race. Until literally 2 laps ago, the top 3 were separated by less than 4 seconds as Oliver Brandt comes down past the start-finish line to win round 7 of the TFR Spring Super Cup. Perfect place for him to do, though. That's all he needs to do. Just stop it at the entry to turn 1, as he's going to allow Kieran Peace to go past him. He will take 2nd position. He's not even going to make it to turn 1, Oliver Brandt. Just going to do it right there. Almost collecting Eric Verdoff. He's going to come home in 4th position, I believe, in the GT2 class. William Paneer completing the race. Having a look back now to see where Kimo Suerman is.
He is on the backstretch.
So Kimo Suerman will be coming down the backstretch for the final time. He, once again, is going to win the GT2 class. A dominant season so far by Kimo. He's got 4 drop weeks. All he needs to do pretty much is win 2 more races to be guaranteed the championship. So Kimo Suerman coming through the final corner for the final time. He is going to win the GT2 race, and a beautiful dominant performance by him to round out your top 5 in the GT1s. Oliver Brandt, your race winner by 2.4 seconds from Kieran Peace. Farouk Manzar is in 3rd. David Peterson, after that late race splash and dash, will finish 4th. Jason Brown rounding out your top 5. And in the GT2, Kimo Suerman, again, I talk about dominance. Kimo Suerman is the definition of dominance in that Aeon number 51 machine. Daniel Kurtzen in 2nd. Toby Bushnell 3rd, Eric Verdoff in 4th, Peter Kiermaier in 5th.
It looked like the car number 2 is also out of gas because he's really approaching slow the checkered flag.
Yeah, car number 2, Mario Vlasic, was very, very slow as he came across the line. A couple of these drivers, you know, will take literally the least amount of fuel possible to get themselves towards the end of this race. And for some of the GT2 drivers especially, all they need, if they end up not not getting lapped a certain number of times, or end up having to do an extra lap because the leader was just, 2 seconds behind them, they would have to cruise around the racetrack on pretty much fumes. And I've seen so many drivers before just stop on the backstretch on the final time just to allow the leader to lap them so they didn't have to run out of fuel. But some amazing performances there. Oliver Brandt did the overtaking maneuver of the season. In case you didn't see it, overtaking Daniel Peterson on the outside coming into the S chicane. One of the most brilliant dominant moves I have seen in a long time by Oliver Brandt on his way to victory. Almost lost the race with 2 mistakes and 2 corners, giving the lead back to Peterson. But managed to use lap traffic to his advantage to find a gap. Kieran Peace, we haven't talked about him too much, but a beautiful finish by him there, taking 2nd position. And Farouk Manzar, he led part of this race, coming home with a strong 3rd place in the race, which will improve his championship position as well. And David Peterson, for a moment, we thought that you had stolen the race there. And then Oliver Brandt managed to sneak his way back past, and then you ran out of fuel, had to do a splash and dash. Talk us through, first of all, the gamble and pitting early, and then those closing stages of the race.
All right. Well, I'd say for one thing, I'm actually happy with how this turned out because, I mean, I would have loved to win the race, but Sebring is my worst track. I've run 28 official races there. I've only ever won once. So if I get anything here, then I'm feeling pretty good about it. But yeah, that first pit stop was entirely strategic. I still had a bunch of fuel in the car, and I saw a bunch of GT2s coming up. I had actually planned this prior to the race, that my fuel strategy involved, if we start coming up on a pack of GT2 cars, that I would go for this pitting early to try to avoid that. And it did end up working out. I came out of the pits in front of, or I went by the pits as Oliver was coming out and got by him. Then I think I was just watching in the mirrors too much because I knew, he's going to be coming out with fresh tires. So even though I've gotten in front of him, it's going to be awfully difficult to keep him behind me for very long at all. And I ended up making a mistake, bobbled it there, let him by. And then for a while he was gone while he was getting the effects of his fresh tires. And so I just couldn't deal with him, let him go. And then after both of our tires had run down a bit, and I was finding I was reeling him in again. So I got up there, and then I started looking at what was going on with my fuel. I had made a decision at the beginning of the race to drop 1 gallon out of the tank from what I was going to start with, and that turned out to be the biggest mistake, because then I was looking at that and trying to conserve fuel, and that's what allowed Oliver to get back up there. And then I had trouble with a GT2 car that I'm not quite sure what happened there, but that got me all messed up, and Oliver slipped by. And after that, I was really going to be having a hard time keeping Oliver behind at that point anyway, because I had serious fuel problems, and even trying to conserve fuel, I ended up having to go for a splash anyway. So that's just the way it worked out.
I like how you said you let Oliver past you on his first lap out of the pit. So I'll bring Oliver into this as well. Overtaking on the outside at that particular point on the racetrack, you didn't really let him have the corner very easily.
I'm not really sure which point you're talking about. I was just kind of steaming through it, trying to make headway everywhere. Any little gap I saw, I just went for it. I got really scared actually after I drove out about a 3-second gap to David, and then suddenly he reeled me in by like 3/10 a lap, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. I just kept adding a little pace, but David was just going faster and faster as well. So eventually he got up to me, and I got nervous, and I made a mistake. He got past, and we got up to the GT2 car. And there was a miscommunication between David and the GT2 car, and David got stuck behind him and just saw a little opening and just darted into it.
Yeah, we traded a lead several times. That was such a fun race. All the way through the first 6 rounds, Oliver and I have never actually gotten closer than just waving at each other. We finally got to duel, and what a heck of a duel this race.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, those last half an hour was incredible to watch, and I have to say, yet again, the overtake on the outside of the corner is, it's definitely one of my nominations for overtaking manoeuvre of the year, despite whether or not, David, you said that you gave him the position, let him pass. I'll let you campaign that one later on, but...
Yeah, I guess I'd have to say I didn't give him the position per se, just after the trouble with the GT2 car. I had a bad entry in there, and rather than trying to defend it from him to the last, I let go of it at the last instead of running into him.
Oliver, I'm going to come back to you quickly. It did look as though you almost threw your race away, and with about 20 minutes left to go, with 2 almost sideways moments, and the final corner, then the last corner, which allowed David to get back past you. Just how hard were you pushing at that point?
I was giving it everything. I absolutely burned up my rear tires trying to keep a gap to David. so it wouldn't come to the point where he actually would get an opportunity to pass, but it backfired by overheating my rear tires, so it got really slippery, the car.
And in all honesty, if it wasn't for the fact that A, David was held up behind the GT2 car, and B, David got his math slightly wrong, what was the realistic chance of you being able to get back past him?
I think it was quite even, to be honest. Anything could have happened there. I mean, I would have given it my absolute all to the end, see it through. And
the most astonishing thing is, one of the closest finishes we've had all year long. For the most part, you three were running within 4 seconds of each other. Yourself, Peterson, and Kieran Peace for the most part of at least a second stint. Some of the closest racing we've seen all season long, and really, under this night track, your concentration must have had to have been sky high.
Yeah, absolutely. If you lapse just once over the bumps of Sebring, the car just bites your head off in an instant. You just have to be on it all the time. You can't go easy on it. The car doesn't like that really. So just the only one thing you can do is go and just push all the time. Keep your concentration up.
David, I'll come back to you in a moment because there's a question I want to ask you, but I know in Rob Sutherland's absence, I could be accused of being too biased towards the GT1 cars. So, Toby Bushnell, hello, you came home third in the GT2 class with a really determined drive there. Had second position for a while until Daniel Kirsten closed you down. Talk us through your race.
Well, thanks, and congratulations to Oliver, of course. It was crazy at first. I'm not sure how many cars we lost at the start, but it seemed like most of the right-hand row of cars. I didn't really get a good view of it. I just tucked in behind John Mallier, and both of us sort of just got through cleanly on the inside. So I was kind of shell-shocked for the first few laps after that, and thinking, this isn't right. Where is everyone? And sure enough, Kimmo had recovered very quickly, and he passed me maybe 2 laps later. And in the process of me having to give Kimmo a bit of space as he came past, Eric actually got by me as well, and I was able to repass him down into the hairpin. I think it's about turn 5. And yeah, it was really good battles, particularly in the first stint there with those guys. Eric and Daniel also had the pace on me really, and just wasn't quite able to stay with him. So Eric grew past me, and after that it was about trying to defend in front of Daniel. But obviously I saw then, I'm not sure if Eric and John Mallier had come together, but I saw Eric had gone off. I think it was maybe turn 1, and then later the same lap I saw Mallier on the start-finish straight. So not sure what happened there, but that kind of gifted me second at the time. But then I went slightly, just 1 click too short on fuel at my stop. I gained about 10 seconds on Kimmo in the stop, and that was nice, but kind of concerning at the same time. And so after that, it was all just about fuel saving, and it didn't really pay me back very well. But ultimately, really fun battle with all the guys today. I think I was about the 5th or 6th fastest forward in the field, and finished 3rd through mostly keeping it clean. So can't complain. A lot of fun, really.
One of the things we've noticed throughout this broadcast is, especially on the night layout, the 4GTs have had to be very careful when running over the curbs and the exits of corners, especially the second from last corner, shall we say, coming down that long final straightaway. How difficult is it to see just exactly how much curb you're using in that 4GT, and just how much you can go to the left or the right coming out of some of these fast sweeping corners to maximise your time?
I think personally I'm learning the width of the car a bit now, more than I had, but it's you've got some sort of cat's eyes that light up the outside of the circuit very well, but obviously beyond that you can't really see particularly clearly where the edges of the curves are. But there's a few tricky ones in that sector that you mentioned, where if you actually take a bit too much curb, you'll not only destabilise the car, but it's almost like you get your tyre hooked over the wrong side of the curve, which is kills a lot of momentum. But yeah, it's certainly challenging.
And you managed to close the gap a little bit to Peter Kiermaier in the GT2 Championship, but lost a little bit of ground to Kirsten, who obviously finished ahead of you, getting a little bit of ground on Verdoff as well. Going next week to beautiful Daytona International Road Circuit, what do you think your chances are to gain some more ground there?
Not good. I've run very little at Daytona. It's definitely my least favourite circuit. So that usually means it's the one you're slowest at and the one you've done the least laps, which is about right for me. So I think a top 8, I'll be really chuffed to come away with double figures in terms of points there.
And I'll bring David back into the conversation. David, one of the things we noticed was that you took a very unique line through the S's chicanes, whichever one you'd like to call it, toward the end of the lap, getting the car all the way onto the left of the tarmac to maximise your speed onto that final right-hander down the back straightaway. How difficult is it to make sure that you don't go too far to the left in this night layout? And also, how much practice did you put in there to be able to maximise it?
I think that's the weakest part of the track for me, actually. And Oliver got me there at one point, demonstrating to me that line leaves him an opening on the inside. But without anybody there, it does seem to work pretty well, at least with my setup, to get a good launch down through there. But I find the entry to the S's, I really have a hard time with it. I tend to overcook it going inside, and if I get the entry to it right, then getting that exit nailed seems to work pretty well. It works out.
And the gap between yourself and Oliver Brandt in the championship, Oliver now has a 7-point lead going into Daytona next week. Do you think you'll be able to close the gap down on the 31 degrees of banking and the famous road course?
I think Daytona is going to be pretty interesting because probably very few people in this field have run on Daytona at all, including me. The only place that I've run it is in Gran Turismo. They've got a version of it there, but that's going to be very different than what you have in iRacing. So I think that's going to be pretty interesting results. It's probably going to shake things up quite a lot.
Oliver, how much experience do you have at the racetrack? Oliver?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, in the Corvette, like David said, and in the Ford GT to some extent, because it's never been run in the official series at iRacing, these cars on this track, on Daytona. So very few people will have any experience with the car-track combo, but personally I have run thousands and thousands of laps in the Grand Am series around Daytona.
And do you think that experience will transfer over from the DP over to the Corvette, or are they just completely different race cars?
Well, they don't behave exactly the same, but having some track knowledge is always quite an advantage. I know which curve to hit and which not to, and where the bumps are and stuff like that.
Well, congratulations to you, Oliver. It's the gap up now to 7 points in the GT1 Championship over Peterson. Next week, we'll be coming to you live, same time, same place, from the beautiful Daytona International Speedway road course. Hopefully, there won't be too much bump drafting if drivers try to go down the oval route. Meanwhile, for myself and Jeffrey Kohlbergen, from Yoni Backman and everyone at Glacier TV, we'd like to wish you a very good evening. We'll be back next week. Farewell.